All right, now that practice in qualifying is done, let's get into the picks video for the Xfinity series at Las Vegas. We did a initial preview, kind of early thoughts video earlier in the week, but this one's going to be a little bit more finalized now that we have an understanding of where the drivers are at as far as practice, how do they arrive to the track, and then also looking at where they're actually starting as far as the starting grid goes. So looking at this slate is pretty interesting. There's a couple different ways you can go as far as lineup construction. We'll post this spreadsheet on Twitter. It's at FastCarsFM. Just got done with the initial pass through. It's pretty late on Friday night, so some changes might happen between now and the lock of the race, which is 3:30 on Saturday, but most likely it's not going to change too much. But either way, it'll be up on Twitter. So looking at the expensive range, we got Gibbs, Gregson, Allgaier, Bain, and Allmendinger. Kind of surprised that Allmendinger was able to get the pole. Just really didn't think this car was going to have the speed, especially looking at the practice times, how fast the Toyotas were in practice. Nonetheless, he came out there and put down a perfect lap and got the pole. However, I'm still really not really interested in him from a DFS perspective. I think, between Trevor Bayne, Noah Gregson, Ty Gibbs, who are right behind him, I just see Allmendinger. If he does lead, I don't see him leading very long before he is giving up that lead to somebody else and, doesn't have any place differential upside. And I'm not really projecting him to be a dominator today. Trevor Bayne would be kind of the contrarian pivot play. I think he's going to be a little bit under-owned than he should be. I think a lot of DFS players, especially for tournaments, are going to go with Gibbs, Gregson, and Allgaier, which, I'm still high on, and we'll get to them in a second. But Bane's interesting. He starts on the front row. Maybe he's able to get the early jump or, stay on Allmendinger's corner panel through turns 1 and 2. Maybe he's able to take the lead on the backstretch. And then he, is actually leading the first lap of the race. That's a very likely possibility. Bane's times were not that different than Ty Gibbs' times. But I think between the two of them, you still have to give the nod to Gibbs. I mean, he's in this car every single week. Basically the flagship car. I mean, it's hard not to play Gibbs, especially when he starts right next to Bain. I could see if Gibbs started maybe a little bit deeper in the field, but the fact that he's right next to Bain, I think is it's going to be a difficult task for Bain. But I think a lot of DFS players are going to assume that Gibbs is going to be that early lap leader. So Bain could be an interesting tournament play. Gregson was a driver that we were really high on coming into this weekend. He's still a driver we're really high on. He's the best driver rating at all the 1.5s so far this year. Looks like, the hottest driver in the series as of late. Just been clocking off wins, having just tremendous runs, great speed every single place that they go to. These JRM cars are fast. Feel very confident about Noah Gregson in your lineup versus maybe some potential other plays on the slate. So I wouldn't really think too hard about that one. And then Allgaier is, he's interesting. You kind of have to play that narrative out in your head a little bit. Okay, I think Gibbs, Gregson, and or Bain are going to be the early lap leader. Well, if they're leading laps and earning those fast laps or maybe picking up the laps led, how else can drivers in my lineup score points? Well, maybe Justin Allgaier, for example, could be one of the good drivers to pair with one of those first 3 drivers that we talked about, because he gives you a bit of place differential. He starts a little bit deeper in the field. Most likely he'll be a factor during stage 2. At some point in this race, he is the second best driver rating on the 1.5s. Practice and qualifying times didn't look great, but I'm pretty confident this team will be able to turn around and run much better on race day. So really, I think start with the 10K range, get the 2 to 3 drivers you feel the most confident with, and then let's hop down to the 8K range. When you get to, or the 9K range, I should say, I was looking at the 8 car. So when you do get to the 9K range, I would say the 8 car is my favorite play. Josh Berry gives you a little bit of a discount off of Justin Allgaier. Very similar type of plays, although I'd feel more confident in Allgaier getting out front and being that early lap leader. But Barry's in the same exact equipment. Barry's been right up there, with Allgaier running really well as well. He gives you a little bit of discount and 2 extra place differential positions. Mayer's more of a GPP option. if you're going to throw a dart, I'd much rather throw a dart on Bane and Mayer. Not really to get to the RCR cars today. I just think they're going to stall out running around, where they qualified. John Hunter Nemechek is interesting. I do like the fact that he qualified a little bit deeper in the field. His practice times were really impressive. I mean, he was right up there with Gibbs, the other, Bain, the other Toyotas. So I feel confident that he should be able to run well during the race. It's just, can he stay out of trouble? Will that car, make it the entire race? It should. I could see him finishing anywhere from about like 5th to 7th if everything goes his way. Like we talked about, we're not really getting to the RCR cars. Hemrick starts a little bit too far forward for us. If you didn't see qualifying, Riley Herbst spun in qualifying, but luckily enough for him, he didn't hit the wall. So he basically just sacrificed his qualifying time, and because of that, he's going to start deep in the field. So yes, he's going to be extremely high owned, but luckily he didn't damage his car. He's going to be a really hard player not to plug into your lineups, especially if you're playing cash games. I think you need to lock him in. And even for $8,500, you can easily play Riley Herbst and still get to 2 drivers up in this 10K range with plenty of salary left for the rest of your lineup. Castle's more of a tournament play. He starts 15th. Maybe he can get you, an 8th to 10th place finish. But again, it's going to be hard to ignore the upside of that Herbst has. Between Sieg and Castle, I'd much rather go to Castle. Jones is another interesting tournament play. For a JGR card, only $8,000. This is a little surprising, but he does start 7th. So it's kind of that weird, almost no man's land. I think he should maintain, probably finishes anywhere from like 7th to 10th during the race, but it's still a JGR car. We know it's top tier equipment. Jones has, been in the Xfinity series for a while. He knows what he's doing. So, I don't mind him, as a potential 4th lap leader in your lineup, or maybe a 3rd lap leader in your lineup if you're, automatically playing Herbst. I mean, it's not out of the world that Herbst could get out there and lead laps, but most likely Herbst is just going to be a strong place differential play that has top 10 upside. Brandon Jones really doesn't have much place differential upside, but he does have lap leading potential. He has fast lap potential. And again, getting a JGR car for $8,000 is very interesting, but more of a tournament play. Not getting to Alfredo, I think he qualifies, or I think he finishes around where he starts. Parker Retzlaff's interesting. He's in the R Motorsports car this weekend. Normally we see him in the RSS equipment. I think the equipment, ironically, is somewhat similar. Maybe the R Motorsports equipment is a little bit better. But this O2 car is kind of just probably their 3rd option on the team. This team is running 3 cars. This car always seems to run the worst of the 3. So again, if you land on him as your last option, I don't mind it, but much rather drop down to Nick Sanchez. He's a little risky, I will say, but I do like him for tournaments just with the equipment alone, and he does start little bit towards, the second half of the field. So he still gives you some place differential, but would not be surprised at all if we see him bring out a caution at some point in this race. Snyder starts a little bit too close to the front of the field. Clements probably finishes around where he qualified, but he's only $7,300. So he's pretty cheap to get in the lineups. I actually do like Kyle Weatherman a lot. I might bump him up to high. He didn't really have great single car speed. I mean, his qualifying times weren't great, but we've seen Weatherman really outperform and get better results in this car than we're used to seeing, especially once Jesse Iwuji is in the car. It's usually a night and day difference. So really like Weatherman. I think as long as he can just, have a clean race, I can see him finishing maybe 18th, 22nd for $7,100. I don't mind that. Braja's a little bit of a riskier play, just kind of like Nick Sanchez is. He has the equipment to stay, inside the basically 15th to 20th. Just for whatever reason, when we get to race day, he just seems to have a lot of single car incidents, puts himself into sticky situations, and usually does not come out for the better on the other side of that. So I don't really think I'm going to have too much Raja today, but again, more of a tournament play. Jeb starts probably around where he's going to finish. Parsons is similar to Raja, but unfortunately, I mean, he just qualified too well. It makes it hard to play him from a DFS standpoint because he doesn't really give you much upside. It's hard to see Parsons finishing any higher than like 14th. And it's very easily that he could finish like 28th or something if he runs into issues or has a flat tire or gets, trapped laps down or, whatever potentially it could be. So great speed, great qualifying efforts out of both, the 44 and the 45 car, the Alpha Prime cars. But for DFS purposes, it's just hard to get there. I don't understand why Chris Wright is $6,400. Not interested in playing him. Just chances of him wrecking out are too high. Earnhardt's in the Joey Gase machine, not really great equipment. JJ Ailey had a really great qualifying effort, but just like the Alpha Prime cars, it's hard to see him finishing any higher than where he qualified. Kyle Sieg's interesting. He didn't take a qualifying time, so basically, I think he does start DFL, but his practice times were pretty good. So, I mean, if we think a lot of cars are going to wreck out, all we really need Kyle to do is stay on the track. So, I think a lot of people are going to go there, and I kind of like pivoting to CJ McLaughlin there. It's the same equipment. I mean, yeah, he does start 4 spots higher, but it's basically the same play as Kyle Sieg. And I think a lot of DFS players are going to go to Sieg. So I think it's just an easy pivot play. Mason Massey probably has a little bit more of a higher upside potential than the RSS cars of Sieg and McLaughlin. Garrett Smithley starts a little bit too close to the front. Josh Williams, I'd rather probably go to Mason Massey or again, probably the RSS cars of Sieg and McLaughlin. Those are probably my 2 favorite punt plays at the top of the I guess, out of the 5K range. Curry's another interesting tournament play. His finishing potential is a lot higher than most of these other cars, and then I'm not really going to get to Vargas, Jaskell Star, or Mills. But one player I do like a lot is Haley Deegan. As you can see, just based off of her practice times and her qualifying times, that this is a little bit more than just a SS green light machine. Looks like Stuart Haas Racing has played a part in preparing this car. She's going to get a ton of media coverage. There's a lot of sponsorship, behind her to make this happen. They don't want her to go out there and run, in the back of the field or have a mechanical failure. She starts 20th, so I think her upside, I mean, I don't really see her finishing any higher than like 15th. I can easily see her getting into an accident or wrecking out, but just the equipment alone, I think she is a good play for DFS. I could see her, maybe going 1 or 2 laps down, but maybe nothing worse than that. So I think just her equipment upside alone for $4,800 is a huge misprice. It's not as bad of a misprice as when we first saw Ty Gibbs, in the Xfinity series for, I think he was like min salary at the Daytona Road Course and didn't even have a sponsor, but was in a JGR car and then went out and won the race. That was pretty funny. But nonetheless, this is the picks video. Hopefully that's helpful. I know there's not a lot of drivers on high. Normally we try to get anywhere from like 10 to 12 on high. It's a little bit lower than that, but I think it opens up a lot of possibilities. There's a lot of drivers who have medium interest that I want to sprinkle into lineups. Hopefully that was helpful. If it was, leaving a like on the video is always appreciated. If you're new here or if you watch these videos a lot and you haven't hit that subscribe button, it literally takes half a second to do that. It means a lot to us and it really helps us out. So if you could do that, that would also be helpful. And once practice and qualifying is on for the Cup Series, we'll get our picks video recorded and we'll get that one uploaded on Twitter as well.